Drive safely. Recording started.
Oh yeah, you did plug it in this time.
No, yeah, there's no... But funny enough, this is the only place where I've been finding to plug it in.
So...
Yeah, you keep it down.
There's a charger on it.
I usually put in one of the bubble bags, but then put the charger on top of the bag.
And then you put another duffel bag in back here too. You put both of them in here, Rob?
Yeah, I put one across and one
On the top.
across the top. Just like this, so because it makes a flat surface. That's what I was just showing you. I was just showing you. Yeah, but then.
She has water in her cup, thanks, but yeah. She has
You
water.
want anything to lean on? You got pillows and blankets?
My pillow, yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, oh yeah, I got everything.
Yeah.
She's got the
You're
pillow.
honoured with my presents today.
Yeah, I know.
When she was doing the pillow.
Hopefully.
Thank you. I just pack up me. I just like comfort.
Hello, and welcome to your Gypsy Guide tour. If you can hear this, then we're off to a great start. We're going to have an excellent day of touring. If at any...
Whoa.
Rahab, we're on the move.
Off we go up. You get your hat on. You got enough room, Jay?
Oh yeah, lots of room, thank you.
Do you need something to lean on from the side?
Oh shit, what I want to do
No,
actually.
that's good, Mom. I'm good. If you don't have enough room, you can actually move your seat more back if you want, Mom. I got
No,
lots.
I'm fine. Love. You've got plenty of room. I've got plenty of room.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
That was fun. That was pretty cool, eh? I haven't even worn my shoes once. God.
The route guidance will start now.
Really?
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye bye Vancouver.
Bye bye Vancouver.
The route guidance will start now. Make a U-turn if possible.
Oh, it's telling me to go backwards.
Hey?
Ooh, stinky feet. How's your thumb?
Lights are green, red.
On the...
Did you get something wrong?
No, I'm going the wrong way. Yeah, well, I'm driving now, bud. What do you...
I know, but I'm just saying, like,
Red light camera on.
Not want to be out in this sun with no long sleeves, I'll tell you that.
Hey?
I would not want to be out in this sun all day with no sleeves.
Everybody's probably used to it now, Rod. You want to get a tan.
Well, considering it's 10 o'clock and it was basically inappropriately hot for us to the point where we needed the air
That'd be
conditioning.
fine. She probably got sunscreen on, man. She's young anyway. She doesn't care if her skin gets brown because they get leathery. Mine's okay. I get used to the sun now. Right, I feel naked without my earrings, Rodney. It's terrible. It's like when you've been wearing a watch for a long time and then you suddenly don't. What they do is basically they build a whole pile of houses and rent them out. They don't sell them. That's how they make their money. So they keep their property and they're making money at the same time. It's good. I think that's what I'd do too, if I had money. Invest in property. No?
Probably not in Vancouver.
Why not?
It's poised to pop.
Why?
Because it's poised to pop.
Overpopulated?
No, it's poised to pop and then crash down again.
You reckon?
Winnipeg is places where it's cheap is probably where you'd want to buy it, if anywhere.
Winnipeg. Saskatoon.
Yeah, but like even Saskatoon.
Nobody where anybody wants to go.
I think Saskatoon is getting expensive. I think Saskatoon is getting expensive.
Some of these garage stations look lovely, don't they?
I will never understand how that is safer.
Hey?
Lane splitting on a motorcycle. There's people that believe it is safer to drive between the cars.
At least you can see them. They're not supposed to switch. They're supposed to stay in one lane.
I don't know what BC law is. In Manitoba, you can't drive between the lanes.
You have to stay in your lane. You have to follow the rules like everybody else. So what time is our first stop? 2 hours?
We'll see how it's going. It's only
Yeah.
3.5 hours in the car today, so
Yeah, but still, you know, we may need a little stretch.
yeah, we'll see.
Don't want to get stressed, because that's what happens, Henry gets
Well,
stressed.
if she's having a kip, I'm not
Oh,
gonna.
yeah.
I'm trying to keep her awake right now.
So that she kips when we get on the highway.
Yeah, then someone trying to drift off, and then I'm like, here's a book.
Ooh, that.
You know I love you, Mommy.
What?
I love you, you know that, right?
Oh, I love you too. You know that. I know, love. I know. I know. You know.
Somebody wrote pages in here.
The route guidance will start now. In 300 meters, turn right onto 96th Avenue.
It's where you have certain cultures gravitate to one particular area of town. I've never ceased to amaze me. Like even down on McGregor and McPhillips, it's from predominantly Filipino. People like from the Philippines and places around that area. And I'm wondering who started that. Maybe one person decided, oh, I like it here.
Oh, one person went there, and people go where it's,
Where there's a church.
well, where their community is, where their brother lives, where their
Yeah.
cousin
Turn
lives,
right
right?
onto
Yeah.
96th Avenue.
And then it just expands from there.
Exactly. Like if you moved to the Isle of Man, where would you get a house? Near Shirley, near Nancy, right? Like you're not gonna go live in Ramsey, right?
Well, I could afford it. I would. Get a car too. Lovely.
But you get my point, right? You're
Yeah.
gonna live
Yeah.
by people you know.
It's funny though, like, anywhere in Europe, they call people, excuse me auntie, or excuse me uncle, or excuse me sir, or excuse me brother. And I remember growing up, and we were not allowed to call grown-ups by their first name, right? It was a sign of respect. So instead of saying, oh, there's Jane's mother Susie,
Route
you'd say,
recalculated.
hello auntie, whether she was your auntie or not. It was just,
In 200
I keep going
meters,
to get
turn
me
right
earrings
onto
out.
Fraser Highway.
and they're
Turn
still
right
building.
onto
They're
Fraser
building
Highway.
and building and won't stop until the place gets so jam-packed. They'll have to eventually stop allowing people to come in.
Route recalculating. Continue on current road for about 1 kilometer.
Because the guy has to walk all the way up to the crane. There's no elevators. You walk all the way up, Ron.
Oh, jeez.
Climb up those stairs, flights of stairs.
The hat in the window, it'll get sunburnt, Rod.
C'est pas pour déchirer après, ok? C'est pas pour lire.
In 700 meters, turn right onto 104 Avenue. 300 meters, turn right onto 104 Avenue.
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with it. It's a bill.
Turn right onto 104 Avenue.
I'm not doing anything with it right now.
Hey, Mom. You want to put that in the glove compartment? Thank you.
It's garbage, really, actually. Just give it to me, Mom.
Oh, okay.
But you need it for anything, honey?
No.
To do your files? Look at this. This, I think, is stupid. Crossing the road, watching the thing. It's just floating down. It's stupid.
What, Mom? I don't understand.
Hey?
What is stupid?
Reading your phone while crossing the road. You're not watching yourself. I mean, for all you know, somebody may whiz by just like those cars did.
And then whatever. That's it then. Look at the name of that daycare, Octopus Academy.
Where?
Right there by the bus.
Octopus, yeah, arms everywhere. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Route recalculating. Make a U-turn if possible.
Church's chicken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Route
Oh, how many
recalculating.
diapers she had.
Oh shit. You can probably reach it. If you
In
want.
300 meters, turn right onto 108 Avenue.
Alright, yeah. Oh, it's just my back is very sore.
Okay.
Turn right onto 108 Avenue.
Póngate a bolsa, se la podía. Donele paso here.
Continue on current road for about 3 kilometers.
Do you want to start loading from the other side? Because the sun will be on you if you're on that side on the way home now.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, alright.
Yeah. It's hard to put a seatbelt on that side anyways.
Okay.
I literally have to fight for it.
Street
In
fight.
700 meters, turn slight right onto 152 Street.
Got you down. Got you down. Smakuje na świat. Tu magie?
In 300 meters, turn slight right onto 152 Street. Turn slight right onto 152 Street.
Wow. 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 Here we go.
Thank you. No, I know. Well, there's our big flag.
Yeah, there's a big flag.
We were just talking on the way down about how Canada doesn't have any big flags.
There's one there.
Yeah.
The save on foods will be done by us when in Winnipeg.
No frills, you mean?
Oh, is it no frills?
Frills, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep forgetting. I get mixed up. So no frills is President's Choice points, right?
That's right.
Oh, that'll be alright then.
Oh, it'll be good either way, yeah. Grocery store within walking distance, I'm not gonna complain.
Out with the trolley. Out we go. That'll
No.
be my exercise every day.
All you can do is hope that it doesn't monsoon.
Houses everywhere. Everywhere. No matter how you squeeze them on, they get on. Hotels squeezed in the corners somewhere.
That's kind of cool. Look, they have a sign saying like all the different delays at all the different places.
Yeah.
So it's like you can decide which border you want to go through.
Trying to make people move faster.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, right?
We're not Gosford borders.
No, not at all.
We're in Canada, right?
Yeah, we're not leaving Canada anymore now.
Pretty fast. That thing's going. Got a chance, isn't he? See, this is what she plays with. Watches on piano. Then she'll pull it stuff. I asked Heather to snip it off. She wouldn't.
Oh, we can go in the fast lane.
You can stay in here all along if you want. Because you're not getting off the highway.
No, because we have more than 2 people in the car.
Motorcycle that has 2 people or what?
No, motorcycle's okay. It said.
Oh, yeah.
Why it's
We should have a talk about the biggest party Vancouver has ever had. The 2010 Winter Olympic Games, which it shared with Whistler. There have been other Olympics since Vancouver, so our memories tend to fade a little. But for the people here, it was an event they will never forget. Let me remind you about a few of the highlights. Events were divided between Vancouver and Whistler. Everything to do with skates or horizontal ice was held in Vancouver. Figure skating, speed skating, hockey, and curling. Freestyle skiing and boarding events were held in Vancouver's local mountains. Whistler was the base for the alpine skiing events, like downhill. The sliding events, or what I like to call sloped ice, that's events like bobsled. And the Nordic events on skinny skis. Again, my terminology for cross-country and biathlon. And lastly, fat skis. And by that, I mean ski jumping. But let's begin with the opening ceremonies. For the first time in a very long time, it was decided that the opening ceremonies would be held indoors at BC Place Stadium, which is normally a football and concert venue. Well, kudos to the smart planning by the organizers, because it absolutely poured with rain outside. So the ceremony was still a lively, colorful, and dry affair. The only portion that was affected was the Olympic flame was located downtown by the waterfront. So the organizers had Wayne Gretzky, Canada's most famous sportsman, riding in the back of a pickup truck with the Olympic flame from the stadium to the cauldron, which is a trip of about 10 minutes. Poor Wayne did his professional best to keep smiling and keep the torch alight until he arrived. Although he was soaked by the time he got there, the mission was complete.
Why is it that only 2 people or more in a car here and not one?
Just to help alleviate with rush hour.
Well, what's the matter of 1 person, 2 people?
The idea is that most of the cars have 1 person in, so they shouldn't be in this lane.
I get that, but like...
Just environmentally wise the way I think.
Yeah, to incentivize people. You get, if you have more than one, if you ride share with someone, you have your own, you get your own lane. To incentivize people to...
oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah.
Encourages people to double up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just one more tale about the Olympics. There are 3 ski hills on the North Shore Mountains that can be seen from Vancouver. None of them are mega resorts, but they all enjoy excellent snowfall and are a whole lot of fun, and only an hour's drive for most Vancouverites. Well, Uller, the snow god, was not too friendly to Cypress Mountain, which was the one chosen to host the freestyle skiing. Freestyle includes the events of skier and border cross, moguls, and the halfpipe. Well, as the Olympics were underway, it rained a lot, and the temperatures stayed well above freezing. It was Vancouver's warmest winter since they began keeping records in 1937. On the mountains, temperatures did not drop below freezing during the nights, so they could not make snow. This caused organizers a major headache. The solution? Like good Boy Scouts, they had prepared well by pushing snow from earlier winter snowfalls up to higher elevations on the mountain to store it at lower temperatures. The snow was then pushed back down the mountain when needed. More than 300 double-trailer truckloads of snow were brought in from Manning Park, some 200 kilometers away. And even more was brought in by helicopters from closer high peaks. Push the snow around to places it was needed, and you have an Olympic venue ready for the world's best skiers and riders. It wasn't the first time winter didn't cooperate with the Olympics. In the 1967 Innsbruck Games, there was also a lack of the white stuff. There, the Austrian army was enlisted to carve out 20,000 blocks of ice from the mountainside and took it to the bobsled and luge tracks, as well as transporting 1.4 million cubic feet of snow to the slopes. So don't feel bad for Vancouver's struggles. It can happen anywhere. One last special mention about Cyprus. Canada had the bizarre jinx of being the only country ever to host an Olympics and not win a single gold medal. And that happened twice, at the Montreal Summer Games of 1976 and the Calgary Winter Olympics of 1988.
Really?
Canada was set for gold early in Vancouver, where we had the favorites for the women's moguls. But Jennifer Heil was upset by an American and pipped into second. Oh no, it couldn't happen again, could it? Well, we didn't have that uncomfortable feeling for very long, as the very next night, Alexander Bilodeau won gold in the men's moguls. The curse was broken, and Canada went on to win a bag full of gold medals. My best guess is that we want to keep going here without stopping, but just in case, let me quickly tell you about Fort Langley. This was the first area of the lower mainland to be settled by Europeans, and the fort was built in 1827 by the Hudson's Bay Company. It was a trading post initially for the fur traders, but then became pivotal for supplying other forts, the newly developing farming community, and then later outfitting thousands of gold rush hopefuls before chasing their golden fortune dreams. Today, the fort is a village and learning facility featuring museums, galleries and studios, and tours designed to be entertaining and educational for visitors and locals. If you're interested to visit Fort Langley, you can follow the signs from exit 66. Vancouver's European settlement history is a little different from the rest of Canada. As always, it's important that we acknowledge that these lands had been occupied by First Nations people for many thousands of years before any white people turned up. most of Canada was settled by Europeans, undertaking a westward migration and overland exploration from what today is the Maritimes, Ontario, and Quebec. But all the way over here on the Pacific West Coast, European arrival also came from the ocean. Here's a quick summary of world politics as it related to the Pacific Northwest in the 18th century. Captain James Cook, the most famous English marine explorer, sailed up the USA and Canada's Pacific coast in 1778. Since a part of that mission on that voyage was to find the speculated Northwest Passage, a faster route across the top of North America to connect Europe to the Pacific Ocean without having to sail all the way around South America first. Though Cook sailed up the coast here, he never turned his ship into the channel between Vancouver Island and what we know today as the mainland of continental North America. His journal indicates he did land and interact with First Nations people on the west coast of Vancouver Island. So, technically, he was the first to connect with Western Canada. One of Captain Cook's crew on that voyage was George Vancouver. 14 years later, in 1792, as Captain George Vancouver, he was commissioned to explore and map this coast that he had seen a little of already. When George Vancouver arrived, he was surprised by another Spaniard who had also just arrived. But rather than a confrontation, the two captains explored the area somewhat together. If you're wondering how the Spanish have come into this story, remember they had occupied Mexico and a big chunk of what is now California. They had made claims to the Pacific Northwest, but never established any viable permanent presence. Things came to a head between Britain and Spain through the 1790s, and Spain was forced to give up its rights here. The British wanted the territories for the Hudson's Bay Company to continue expanding its business, and they were successful in achieving this.
Somewhere. I think it was, we were at one of Heather's soccer games, but I think it was in the States or somewhere. Anyway, I wrote on it, you know, to be used for Heather's wedding. It's getting there. I hope it's going to be okay.
Established forts on Vancouver Island and in what is now Washington and Oregon. These areas were originally supplied by ships. Quite a long journey to get there, though the introduction of steamships reduced this journey to only 6 months long. Simon Fraser was the first to make his way overland from the east all the way to the lower mainland. But it was the Hudson's Bay Company that sent an expedition in 1827 to create a permanent presence in what today is Langley. Growth was very slow for the next 30 years, with more trading and establishment of some farms. Things were shaken up in 1858 when word of gold discovery in the Fraser River spread like wildfire. Within months, tens of thousands of prospectors flooded in from the USA and mainly California. This made the British governor of Vancouver Island just a little bit nervous. So a proclamation was made that Vancouver Island and the British Columbia mainland was a colony of Britain. Over the next 10 years, the population increased, but was still minimal. 10 years later, the new country of Canada is created in 1867. British Columbia is not part of the new Canada, and with no viable direct link to the east, BC was destined to remain a separate colony. 4 more years passed, and in 1871, British Columbia agreed to join the new Confederation, protecting itself from being overrun by migrating Americans. Crucial to that agreement was the promise that a Trans-Canada Railway would link the full nation from sea to sea. The British Columbians might not have been so eager to join if they had known that it would take another 15 years for that promised railway to be complete. But it's now 1885, and BC is now a province of Canada and linked to the east, allowing passage of goods, travelers, and settlers to and from the east. British Columbia also became crucial to the dominant provinces of Ontario and Quebec, as it also opened up efficient trade between Canada and Asia.
Drives itself, Mum.
Well, you still have to be around it though. It's not actually like automatic pilot.
Pretty close.
Yeah, but it's not though.
Of Vancouver's lower mainland is also called the Fraser Valley, and the Fraser Valley is named for the Fraser River. There's also the Fraser Canyon and the Fraser Highway.
Oh my gosh.
So you probably know where I'm going now, don't you?
What?
I'm going to tell you who this Fraser fellow is.
What?
Simon Fraser might not have been a household name across Canada, but he certainly is in this area. He was the first European known to have traveled through the Fraser Valley. Were it not for his persistence and courage, British Columbia might well have been a much different place. At the very least, there would have been fewer things named Fraser. Fraser immigrated to Canada from the United States in 1784. He became a principal director of the Northwest Company.
Different details for a red flag.
That was the direct competitor of the more famous Hudson Bay Company in the
sticking
early
out
times
like
of
3
the fur and
inches,
trading
3 feet
business.
from the
He was asked to finish exploring a route across Canada to the west coast. Fraser undertook his mapping expeditions of the Fraser River between 1805 and 1808. He managed to complete the dangerous job, which had been left unfinished by Alexander Mackenzie, another explorer and Fraser's predecessor. To map the river, Fraser had to deal with intense terrain, including thundering waterfalls, boiling rapids, sucking whirlpools, and treacherous cliffs. Often, it was just as difficult to pull the canoes out of the water and walk around the terrain features as it was to simply make a sign of the cross and head through the obstacle on a wing and a prayer. Added to the list of challenges was the occasional hostile First Nations group, who were none too keen on seeing these white guys interfering with their lands. In the end, Fraser canoed almost the entire length of the dangerous river, right into its mouth beside Vancouver. Despite his incredible feat, Fraser wrote of being extremely disappointed for not reaching the Pacific Ocean. At the time, he had no way of knowing that he had reached the Pacific. He didn't think he had because his view of the open ocean was blocked by Vancouver Island. Fraser was said to be gifted with unusual physical endurance and courage, and he remained calm and resolved when facing dangers and difficulties. Though it was an amazingly dangerous but useful achievement, his expedition did not arouse popular interest before the centenary celebrations of his feast in 1908, long after his passing. Here's something else named for him. How about the Simon Fraser University in Vancouver? It's disappointing that as an explorer, sometimes your work isn't appreciated until after you die, much like famous artists. Abbotsford, where they call themselves the city in the country. As we drive by the Clearwater Road Highway exit, you may be able to catch a glimpse of a 47-foot tall raspberry public art sculpture on the south side of the highway. The sculpture sits in the middle of a traffic roundabout and features what I'm sure would be 5 of the biggest raspberries you will ever see, dangling off leafy green stalks. Abbotsford is officially known as the raspberry capital of Canada. Hence, the statue is almost a way of making it more official. Abbotsford is quite dedicated to public art, and another interesting piece represents the life cycle of salmon. The first settlers in Abbotsford were John and Martha McClure, who crossed the Fraser River in 1868 and settled in what is now Clayburn Village, a heritage conservation area of Abbotsford. It really must have been a strange and brave thing to do back in those times, to be the very first settlers of an area, especially when you've entered the lands of original First Nation groups who may or may not approve of your presence. Here, they claim to hold 200 different events, festivals, and celebrations. Considering the first-class agriculture of the region, each weekend, these are some of the best farmers' markets for beautiful fresh produce anywhere. The most widely recognized event here is the Abbotsford Air Show. Each year on the second weekend in August, more than 100,000 spectators flock in to demonstrations of historical and ultra-modern pleasure and fighting aircraft in action. The show is internationally recognized, and air forces from all over the world will come to participate. Abbotsford really does have a lot going for it.
Be good, Roger.
As we pass through Abbotsford, we're at the closest point to the U.S. border the Trans-Canada Highway gets to on this side of Ontario. We'll be barely a mile from crossing the 49th parallel into Washington State. Don't worry, I promise we'll stay inside Canada for this drive today, so you don't need to find your passport. We will see signs for a fairly major border crossing at Sumas. Canada and the U.S.'s relationship is unique. and that we have the world's longest shared border, and that it's largely unguarded. Because of the proximity and the friendly relationship, this also represents the world's largest bilateral trade agreement. I'm going to share some stats with you to help us appreciate just how intertwined our trade and travel is. The numbers will vary from year to year, so I'll just stick to some ballpark numbers. See, even that's more of an American saying. The shared border length works out to 8,900 kilometers, or 5,500 miles. Now, we should put an asterisk on that because about 30% of that is the barely populated junction of Alaska and Canada. But still, that is a lot of border. Well over $1 billion of trade occurs between the countries every single day. Though 75% of the trade is from Canada into the U.S. About 300,000 people cross the Canada-U.S. border each day, as vehicles up to 200,000 cars and trucks cross the border each day. About twice as many trips are taken by Canadians to the USA than Americans coming into Canada. It's very common for Canadians to go on a day trip to the USA for shopping, as prices tend to be lower. I've had friends who cross the border to fill up with a tank of gas and buy milk because it's cheaper. In fact, I've seen people come home with a full trunkload of milk. For our American friends, you should like that shopping business. On average, when a Canadian takes a day trip to the USA, not an overnight stay, just in and out on the same day, we'll spend about $100 per person. When you add up all the trips by Canadians into the USA, including overnight trips, we add as much as $20 billion to your economy just in our personal spending.
Someone just walked by a homeless person sleeping, right? And just kicks him for no reason.
Though the lower mainland tends to always be lovely and green, if it's a hot and sunny summer day, you may notice that visibility in the Fraser Valley isn't all that great. Unfortunately, this is typically caused by smog. Ocean breezes flowing in off the Georgia Strait between Vancouver and Vancouver Island. Funneled by the coast mountains, these breezes push all the vehicular, domestic, and industrial air pollution down the Fraser Valley. Then the pollution gets trapped by the Columbia Mountains, holding it in like a bowl. This, of course, is a growing source of concern for residents. Intense air quality monitoring has begun, and officials are looking for solutions. Warnings are used if the air quality drops below acceptable standards, but that doesn't really solve the underlying cause. Metro Vancouver instated a compulsory program for 20 years called Air Care, which required mandatory testing of every vehicle's exhaust emissions every 1 or 2 years. Most motorists hated the time and expense of the testing and prayed that their car would pass without requiring any repairs. Air Care became obsolete as new vehicle emission standards have improved significantly by manufacturers. Fraser, the explorer who's given the task of exploring what is now British Columbia and finding a suitable route all the way to the coast, passed through here. But of course, it looked nothing like this. Since he was employed by the Northwest Company, the purpose of his journey was to establish posts to enable the fur trade, and that's what brought him to this area. In his journal, he made a special note about the huge longhouses, almost 200 meters long and 20 meters wide, that were built by the native people of this area. That must have been such an impressive sight. The Salish people built these longhouses as multiple family homes, and in the large ones, it could be that a dozen or more families lived together, meaning more than 100 people. That was exceptionally large, since most of the longhouses were much smaller. They were built with posts and beams and cedar planks for walls and roofs. The great thing about the design was that it could easily be extended to allow more families to move in. That's how some of them became so big. Inside, raised platforms about 4 feet high were built against the walls as sleeping areas. But the thing that I would have liked to have seen was that the thick outside posts that supported the walls were often ornately carved. Something like totem poles, but these were called house posts. It was another beautiful opportunity to depict the spirits from which men were transformed.
On a job site, it's a big flag.
There was a time when everything surrounding us was all a lake. This area was reclaimed in the 1920s to create more farmland. In the process, the Chilliwack and Better rivers were redirected away from Sumas Lake to the Sumas River, which drained into the Fraser River. The new drainage ditch was named Better Canal, which we cross here. There's something of a giant that lives here in the Fraser River. That giant is a fish called the sturgeon. I don't think I'll offend anyone by saying that the sturgeon has to be one of the ugliest fish on the planet. It looks a little bit prehistoric, like a Frankenstein experiment gone wrong. But a full-grown sturgeon is massive, and most likely very old. They've been recorded weighing a half-ton, be 10 feet long and maybe 200 years old. The idea of eating the meat turns some people's stomachs, but to others, it's a delicacy. The sturgeon in these waters are protected, so if you catch one, you must release it. But some poachers will risk fines and prison by keeping them. You might be wondering if there's a caviar business here because of the presence of the sturgeon. The answer is yes, but it's a very small industry. The sturgeon for BC's caviar are farmed fish grown in strictly regulated, sustainable environments. snow-capped mountains surrounding it, the Fraser River used to regularly flood the valley through which we're driving, especially during the annual spring thaw. Massive and expensive efforts by authorities prevent it from continuing to do so. One of the largest floods to occur here caused significant damage back in 1948. Back then, Vancouver was still considered a frontier town, and this area was sparsely populated rural farmland. Still, the flood forced the evacuation of some 16,000 people, and 2,300 homes were damaged or destroyed. Quite a significant percentage of the population was affected. Today, there are a dozen or so small cities and municipalities along its shores. And results of a flood like that today would be, well, devastating. To prevent another catastrophic flood, both the federal and provincial governments have spent tremendous amounts of money to improve and expand flood protection
Following
through
a
an
professional
extensive
driver,
banking
right?
system.
I was about to
There are
wave to
about
him and head
600
down on his phone.
kilometers of dikes,
No way, really.
flood boxes, and
Sorry.
pump stations to protect
You know,
communities
oh,
and
that's
infrastructure. Silt washed down from the mountain is removed from rivers to keep them deep
Is this
and able to
Hope?
contain as much water
Not yet.
as
No,
possible.
Hope's probably another half hour
Every
yet.
year, the
I watched
Fraser
that
threatens
show,
to flood. Engineers
Highway to
predict
Hell,
that there's a 1
right?
in 3
And
This
they
is
ha-
this is
that a
Chilliwack one. You
significant
Yeah.
probably know
flood
this
will occur
town.
within the next 50 years. It's believed that if this happens
like,
and the mitigation efforts don't
some of the
cope,
things that happened
the
on the
potential
coke,
losses could be tens of
unbelievable,
billions,
you know?
and 500,000
And their station
people
is in Hope.
displaced. That
and I'm
would
into
not
all the
be good.
characters. It's a reality
The
show,
trade-off
you know,
for
like
preventing the
the
cycle
truck
of flooding
drivers.
is the change it
And it's
has on
really
how the
good.
surrounding
It's a true
environment
story,
is
you know,
to
about the
adapt to
families
flooding.
and everything.
For example, with each
And
spring
in the
flood,
dangers
the
thing,
Fraser
then
River
one fellow
used to
was
spread
killed and he was
fertile
found under
silt
the
across
truck.
the valley floor and
You know, and then the
rejuvenated
other
the
kid just said, I
wetlands that
can't do
supported
this, and he
abundant
left.
wildlife.
Can't do this.
Today, since
Yeah.
we have stopped the cycle of flooding, we've also stopped that natural
we don't
spreading of fresh
realize
new silt washed down
What
from
these
the mountains.
truck drivers and tow
Is that
truck
a
drivers
problem?
do for us, you know?
Well,
Yeah.
we'll just have to wait and see.
They help us. They never talk about money though, so I'm wondering how they get paid. They must get paid. The big jobs get paid. They take days sometimes to get the salvage up and get the thing from down the side of a cliff or whatever, you know? Amazing. I just love it. I love it. I love people shows, real people shows, you know? Love the cars out here, don't they?
I
Hey?
do, yeah.
Bloody hell. Every other bloody block is cars, car dealerships, cars, dealerships. Veterinary clinics, you know.
We're approaching the small city of Chilliwack on the north side of the highway and the smaller community of Sardis on the other side. During the gold rush days, 30,000 miners passed through here on their way to the gold fields. It's hard for us to imagine today what that really must have been like. A relatively quiet outpost suddenly swarmed with hundreds of new arrivals each day, all hoping to kit out with supplies. And not to state the obvious, but of course, there was no highway then. For many, it was a long, rough journey by boat just to get to Victoria, which had a fort. From there, to save a few bucks, groups of men would purchase a canoe to paddle across the strait and into the Fraser River. After that, it simply came down to having to walk on trails, usually carrying everything you own and everything you need to prospect for gold. Packs commonly weighed 80 pounds or more. Not everyone had the commitment to see the journey all the way to the BC interior. You could say that Chilliwack today has a different kind of gold rush. Cheap gas. Well, cheaper anyway. Being outside the Greater Vancouver Regional District, taxes are less out here, so many local motorists will make a point of filling up here and saving a few bucks. Fraser Valley is home to some of the most productive agricultural land in Canada and the world. Its fertile soil and climate that does not experience too much deep freezing makes it ideal for a whole host of different crops. Add to that how the valley's located close to a major population center and the access to other markets that brings. And this is an extremely ideal location for farming, and as you might expect, it dominates the local economy. But because it is so desirable here, the population is growing. And of course, that leads to agricultural land becoming developed land. Farming is feeling the squeeze here. As a landowner, you might be faced with the decision of whether to work the land with some risk of crop failure, or fluctuating prices, or cheap imports, or a whole host of other risks. Or you can sell your land to developers and retire, or just get a regular job. The agriculture industry here is a vital source of food and contributes heavily to the economy. Throughout BC, agriculture is a multi-billion-dollar industry. More than half the revenue is generated right here in the Fraser Valley from fruit and berry crops, eggs, poultry, vegetables, nursery stock, turf, mushrooms, and dairy products. Yet agricultural land accounts for only 1% of BC's land mass. Compare that to how approximately 12% of BC's land is being protected as parks. Beyond just farming, industry in the Fraser Valley also includes forestry and commercial fishing. Tourism, manufacturing, and production also play a role. It is really nice to live here, close to the mountains and lake playgrounds, and it costs less than living in the city. No wonder the population is booming.
I said maybe. No, I would too.
You know, have my little garden with the flowers and the little cars and next to the shops and stuff, the church and everything. Little community farm. This thing is done building here, see? Up on the road, see? Houses. Interesting, eh?
I have two suggestions for stops just ahead. Let me tell you about both of them, and then you can decide if you want to do one of them, or both of them, or none of them. The first is the pretty Bridal Falls, and it's right beside the highway, so it won't be more than 15 minutes or so to see. It's not the most original name. Lots of places have a Bridal Falls. This one, however, got its name because the water tumbles 60 meters over a smooth rock face, creating a veil-like effect. With the backdrop of Mount Sheen, this area is really very pretty and a great place to take some nice photos. That said, Bridal Veil Falls is prone to freezing during cold winters, forming a wall of unstable ice. During these periods, the base of the falls can be extremely hazardous, as chunks of ice are known to come tumbling down the face. The second place I suggest we might like to visit takes a little more commitment, but it's a lovely side trip, and that is to visit the lakeside community of Harrison Hot Springs. It'll take about 20 minutes to get there after we exit, but it is a really nice place to explore if we have some time. As the name suggests, there are hot springs there beside the pretty Harrison Lake. there's a public pool filled by the warm mineral waters, or for a more luxurious experience, there's a series of indoor and outdoor pools at the same named resort and spa. There are also some natural springs available with a walk out of town. Just ask for a map at the visitor center. There are lots of galleries and places to meander around beside the nice sandy beach. So in all, I would describe it as a fine example of a BC lakeside resort town. I'll point out the exit to get to Bridal Veil Falls. After visiting the falls, we use the same road to continue on to Harrison Hot Springs. If you want to skip both of these, then just stay on the highway.
And we'll look at the waterfall.
Exit to the right to visit Bridal Veil Falls or Harrison Hot Springs, or both. If we want to go to Harrison without visiting the falls first, you'll see the ramp peel away to the right to join the overpass over the highway. Follow that for Harrison Hot Springs using Highway 9. To go to the falls, keep following the exit ramp until it eventually bends to the right. There will be signs there. At the T-junction, turn left to get to the falls. They're at Popcom Road. You'll see some small signs, but it's pretty easy. After we visit the falls, if we want to get back onto the highway to continue east towards Hope and Kamloops, keep following this same road past the falls. It'll lead us to the next highway entry. If we wanted to visit the falls and then go to Harrison Hot Springs, then drive back on this road to get to the overpass that takes us to Highway 9 to Harrison Hot Springs. So, come back on this road to get to Harrison. Keep going along this road to get back on the highway.
gone too far. Guess not. That's the last one?
No, there's no back in here.
Okay, take a left here, and then we'll see the turn to re-enter the highway on our right.
Oh,
I missed it.
General.
Yeah.
Can't turn around road.
Yeah, I can. There's no cars anywhere. I felt like I'd missed it.
I thought you missed it because I saw the sign. I thought, well, I thought we were doing this.
I thought that was a hiking. I was going to turn down there and it looked like a hike.
Blue sign, little blue
Yeah.
sign, yeah.
It looked
Not
like
a big sign, just before the cafe.
it looked like that was for people to walk in.
Yeah. You're the driver.
Shush.
I need to go to the lab anyway. If it's dirty, well, I'm not going.
Do you want to stop at the gas station then?
Well, there's places here, there's a cafe and everything here.
You want to go before we go to the waterfall or?
Probably. Everyone can stay sleeping. You're still sleeping now? We'll leave it for a bit then.
What's that sign say?
Nothing, just public footpath.
Okay.
Yeah. A picnic area. So where do we park?
You want to go to the bathroom first?
Yeah. Can you just walk in and go to the toilet, Tom?
Sure. What the hell is this? Oh. I've never seen them before. It's a sport mode. Where? Oh yeah. Exactly what I'm doing. go to the waterfall.
A nice clean place.
Just because we're on an angle, so the weight was sitting on it. So
I'll put my runners on.
I don't think it's a long walk. She said it takes you 15 minutes in total.
No, I'll put my runners on though.
That's, I'm not saying don't. I'm just.
You know what it is now?
No. I've never been here before. Seatbelt, please.
Trees.
It is there. Nice little park. That's why these tour guides are nice, you know, they tells you little spots to pull in.
Yeah.
We never would have come here if we were just driving down the highway.
Yeah. Look at the trees.
Wow.
The weird trees, aren't they?
I
I
know.
don't mean that. Like,
I know what you
they're
mean.
different.
I know what you mean, Mom. You don't need to.
Oh, okay. Ay, ay, ay. Look at the trees.
We're in the we're deep in the forest.
Naturologists.
Naturologists.
Thank you. Go in there, parking in the cool.
Oh, if I can.
That's where you go.
Oh, I hear a munchie.
Oh. This would probably be a nice one too.
Yeah, those trees are pretty cool. It's like they're deep in the jungle. Like, just,
Wait till you hear them.
oh, I could hear something. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is it cool? She needs a sweater?
Yeah, no.
No, it's nice.
Beautiful. I'm just going to the bathroom quick.
Who's that?
Hi.
Who's that?
Hi. Got your hug face?
Ah, sure. Very sweet.
Nana's gonna put her on.
Drive safely. Recording started.
Nice enough person comes up to you, starts talking to you. Let's say the conversation starts to go in the direction of politics. You talk for a while, at some point in the conversation.
We good?
Thank you.
Oh, good. I'll have some sweets.
Yeah, we need some energy. What do you want,
Kind
Mud?
of energy.
Somebody's been into them, I see. Oh, here, you have a nice mint.
Chapeau.
What would you like, hon?
Something chewy, like a toffee or a...
Fruity one?
Yeah.
What, these ones?
Chapeau.
Yeah, those are good.
Chapeau is another word.
All right, then.
Oh, and that kind of casket.
Oh, shit.
Never mind, hon.
What?
We get it
I
after.
let the candy there. Oh, that's you dropped it.
Little Robin.
Caskets.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect.
Is there any chicks there, hon?
Yeah.
That one.
No.
What? Who
The
opened?
bag of Doritos was put upside down in the bag.
Oh,
I pulled it up and it all emptied in there.
no. Oh,
Where's
no.
the little thing, the little clipper that pull off?
It must have fallen off.
Oh.
Oh, well. Go get
Never
it.
mind, hon.
Yeah. Actually, it's not as bad as I thought it was. Do you want the Doritos or you want to open a new bag?
Finish those Doritos first.
Mom wanted chips,
I need
right?
the clips.
Mom wanted chips, right?
Oh, mutton chips.
Huh? Mom, do you want chips?
No, thank you.
Oh. I thought
You want chips, huh?
Mm.
I thought you said you wanted chips.
No.
Oh, what time is it now? Oh, it's your lunchtime. No wonder you're hungry. She's like, oh, food. Oh, Maji. Say, so Othello? Othello. You need some water? Okay, I'll just come in here.
Just bread and peanut butter in the bag, you know, Jay.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting out.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting out. Yeah. Oh, Maji. Yeah.
It'd be a nice camping area, though, wouldn't it?
Dude, there's only 2 slices.
I love mangoes.
There's only half a bread in there, Ronnie. I thought I was 3/4. That should be good. Oh, I go for it. I'm just kidding. Do I have like banana in that bag? No, I don't think so.
No.
No, okay. I can always make a bread. I can always make a sandwich in case you.
No.
Just so hungry, right?
Exactly.
Just bread and I'll improvise with a knife. So. Saucy de Lucy.
Good.
De Lucy.
It's the computer does it.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Yeah, somebody was just been hiking in the woods and then they hear this water and then just follow the roaring
Yeah.
of the waterfalls. Right?
Okay,
Yeah, 'cause
take
it's
a
the
left
wrong
here, and then we'll see the turn to re-enter the highway on our right.
Oh, it's left, huh?
Yeah, left and then right.
Gosh. Yeah, those toilets were actual toilets.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting. Whoa. That's gross. Yeah, I would have got tired of carrying her, but
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Really?
and a mosquito got me on my arm.
Come on, man. Are you serious? Are you fucking serious? You're gonna run me off the road?
Watch,
What the
watch.
fuck is your problem, you asshole?
Do you have your sandwiches? Yeah.
Of course I did.
Okay.
You wouldn't move over.
I wouldn't move over.
That
This
happens to me.
region in the Fraser Valley
In
was the
Winnipeg.
domain of the Stolo
Going
First
along.
Nation.
Watch.
The Stolo were part of the Coast Salish Indians.
And all they did
And
was
their
hump
name
me.
means
Get out of the way.
river
Where am I going to go?
Coast Salish refers to different groups of First Nations with common forms in their language. River people is a good clue
want
of the
soft
dominant
ones.
influence in
Yeah,
their
I know you
culture.
do.
The Fraser River runs alongside us here, and the millions of salmon that swim up to spawn were a rich source of food and cultural influence.
No,
for
because
the
how did he
Stolo.
turn over in the end?
Archaeological research
knew he
confirms
had
that they
to.
lived here in the vicinity of the Fraser and Coquihalla rivers for at least 9,000 years, dating back to the last ice age, and perhaps even before. During that time, the Stolo culture evolved from rudimentary societies where everyone was equal and living in simple, temporary housing. Over time, they advanced to more complex social hierarchies, efficient tools and weapons, large homes and art and jewelry. Historians attribute the beauty and complexity of the coastal people's art and crafts to the benefit of having a relatively bountiful source of food and resources. This allows for more free time to develop more sophisticated and intricate art skills. Compare this to other Aboriginal people who may have lived in less agreeable conditions and had to expend enormous energy to hunt down or find the next meal, and maybe not know where the next one after that will come from. After an exhausting day of that, you might not feel like sitting down to do some weaving, beading, or carving. The history of the Stolo people is an entirely oral one, passed down by elders through generations over thousands of years. The oral history takes two main forms: true stories or news, and legends and stories from the Transformer period. These myths detail how the Stolo came to be, created from the chaos that existed before. Oral tradition explains how people became fully human and connected to the world they inhabit today. These legends often involve transformation and describe a time when people, animals, and supernatural beings had the ability to change between different forms. The world came into order when the Transformer changed people into animals, plants, and stones, which became ancestors of the contemporary Stolo. Such transformations establish the connections the Stolo have with the land they live in, and are reflected beautifully in their art too. The dense undergrowth that we see around here was a nightmare for early explorers. Trekking through unfriendly plants and bushes like bracken and hardhack, as well as battling through dense stands of salal and deadfall in wooded regions, made progress difficult. Because blazing a trail was such hard work, wherever possible, early explorers would first follow existing First Nation trade routes from the Pacific coast to the interior of British Columbia. These trails appeared on early BC maps as a dotted line marked Grease Trail, often leading to and from the many coastal rivers. Now, Grease Trail seems like an unlikely name, and the stories are that the name derived from a small fish. For hundreds of years, the Yulacon, a member of the smelt family, swam up the nearby Fraser River to spawn each spring. The Stolo local First Nations people caught the fish and smoked it or ate it fresh. But other native tribes, especially between Squamish, Whistler, and North to Lillooet, caught the Yulacon, but then stored them to ripen, for lack of a better word. The tiny, dried, and naturally fermented fish were then cooked in vats until they turned to grease. They then put the grease into cedar boxes, which were transported along well-worn routes into the mountains and traded with other bands for various goods, including furs, copper, and obsidian for making sharp tools and weapons. Yulacon grease used as a sort of condiment, though maybe not quite like ketchup, was credited as having good nutritional value and helped with maintaining good health in the native population.
Huh? Smells like him. Spray air freshener. What is it?
Could be the candy somebody did maybe?
What love?
Jerry smells something.
It smells like a really strong.
I put some lotion on me
Oh, that's what it is.
because I washed my hands in the toilet and then my hands were a bit dry.
Yeah, Mama can make you another sandwich, but she can't if you want more.
I'm going to talk about a subject that I'm hoping is totally not an issue for us today, but it's highly significant for this region. Rain. Vancouver and the coastal northwest USA is famous, or infamous, for rain. And it's true, it can be very wet here. But let me give you a few numbers to confirm or dispel some of those myths and truths. Let's start with Vancouver. On average, Vancouver receives 1,150 millimeters of rain each year. In inches, that works out to 45 inches, or nearly 4 feet. Now, I won't convert all of these numbers to inches, as it's the proportion that's interesting. So remember, Vancouver, 1,150 millimeters, and it rains on average 161 days each year. So let's compare that with Seattle, which has the reputation as the USA's wettest city. Seattle's average rainfall is 950 millimeters, or about 20% less than Vancouver, and it rains 150 days each year. So, not that much different. The rain that hits both of these cities comes from the marine effect, with wet systems arriving on the shore of the Pacific. Now, I want to stick up for Seattle. New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C., and practically every other eastern seaboard major city actually get more rainfall than Seattle. What makes Seattle seem so much worse is that it experiences about 20% more rainy days than those other cities on the east. So in the east, it rains less often, but the rain is heavier. But in Seattle, to have 30 or even 40 more days with light rain each year, well, that's how it gets labeled as a rainy city. Now, let's see how big of an effect these big mountains have. The town of Hope is the marker that we'll use, since it sits right at the base of the first big mountain range. And because it sits on the side that the rain systems reach first, it makes sense that Hope should be wet. Vancouver gets 1,150 millimeters of rain. Hope gets 1,950 millimeters.
Shit.
That's getting close to double. Those mountains really make the precipitation fall out of the clouds big time. Kamloops is about another 2 hours further inland at the base of these mountains, and there are 2 full mountain ranges between here and there. So, here's how much those mountains do to force the rain out of the clouds. Kamloops receives just 224 millimeters of rain each year. Vancouver, 1,150, Hope, 1,950, Kamloops, 224. And Kamloops only gets half the number of days with rain as Vancouver. So even when it does rain, it's really quite paltry in comparison. The good news for travelers to coastal BC is that they come in the summer months. And thankfully, the summers are the dry months. But for the other 8 months of the year, visitors should fully expect to experience some rain during their stay.
Look at this car, Chaka.
The mountains are really closing in around us now, aren't they?
Yeah.
These mountains form a section of the Cascade Mountains that follow from here south to and across the U.S. border of Washington State. We're going to drive through many different mountain ranges if we're going all the way to the Canadian Rockies, each different in its own way. We're now just a few minutes from the town of Hope. Hope is the place where there are 3 different choices of highway that can be taken. If you're following my tour today, then we're going to take the Coquihalla Highway, or Highway 5, which is by far the fastest way to Kamloops and on to the Rockies. I'll make sure we stay on track, but it's easy. Just keep following the signs for Highway 5. The true and original Route 1 actually turns more north from Hope and follows through the Fraser Canyon. This is quite a spectacular drive inside the steep canyon. But now, because the Coquihalla is so much faster, there's far less traffic on Route 1. If you choose to go that way, I don't have any commentary for that route, so you'll have to go it alone. The most popular attraction on the route is Hell's Gate, a cable tram that crosses a particularly violent section of the canyon. It's really impressive. The other highway that breaks away just outside of Hope is Highway 3, which travels through Manning Park. It's a beautiful drive and takes travelers to Osoyoos at the extreme southern end of the Okanagan Valley. One last comment about the different highways. If our plan is to go to Kelowna in the Okanagan today, then keep following me along Highway 5, and when we reach the town of Merritt, I'll let you know where you can turn off for the Okanagan Connector, which is the fastest way to Kelowna. Okay, hope that wasn't too confusing. If you're following me, then we'll follow Highway 5. I've explained about the highway options, but perhaps we're feeling like we might like to take a short break, or perhaps stop for a snack. The town of Hope is a good choice, as we'll not see another town for at least 1 hour, and nothing of any size for at least 2 hours. If you want to stop into the town, then I recommend the second exit, and I'll tell you when that comes out. They have a lovely park with chainsaw carvings, and there's a really good little bakery opposite the park for coffee and treats. If you do exit, I'll provide directions. Take this next exit to go into the town of Hope. After you exit, turn left when we reach the T intersection.
There's already that many
The signs are easy to follow.
mountains on your side anyways that I can really see, so it wasn't bad. No. Or no.
Signs covered up for it.
Don't know, huh?
Looks like we're continuing without stopping in at Hope. That's fine. Let's keep going. We'll quickly see the exit for Highway 3. Our
Thank you
route
very
is
much.
Highway 5, but if you're interested,
Yes.
a 20-minute side trip down Highway 3 will take us to Hope Slide. In 1965, this was the scene of a massive and deadly rock slide. It's quite an eerie sight to see the boulder and rubble field and the collapsed slope where all that debris came from. If you're interested in taking a quick look, I'll have just a little commentary to get us there. But then we'll come back to continue on Highway 5. So here's the exit that would take us to the Hope Slide. It should take no more than about 20 minutes or so to get there and back to here, and have enough time to take some photos. Exit to the right if you want to see Hope Slide, or just keep following Highway 5 if not.
Want to?
It doesn't matter to me.
Sure, why not? We got lots of time, so. Oh, my ear just popped.
Huh?
My ear just popped.
Yeah, sit here. What? More eating? What more? You want more blue fish? Blue fish? More blue fish to eat? Yeah.
Called the Crow's Nest Highway.
Is it?
That's why there's crows and slides.
Good for you. I see you want to take a look at the Hope Slide. It's good to try and keep an open mind and remember to stop and see the things along the way as we drive. I see so many people who are in such a rush to drive to their next destination that they forget that the journey to get there is part of the fun. So we'll continue for about 5 minutes to get to Hope Slide. As we arrive, there are good signs to get to the viewpoint, and I'll point out the turn. On our drive today, we'll see a lot of how it's a struggle to keep the forces of nature at bay from blocking, if not completely destroying, the highway. Hope Slide is an example of where nature was is just too strong and is the location of a massive land and rock slide that collapsed in 1965. In fact, it's the largest recorded rock slide in Canada. The debris field was 3 kilometers, or 2 miles wide, and as much as 85 meters deep.
You couldn't move it.
Unfortunately, 4 people were killed by the slide. It happened during winter, and it was believed that a smaller avalanche had blocked the highway. While those people were considering whether to turn around or wait for highway crews to come and clear the snow and then continue, the massive rock slide released, carrying away 2 vehicles with 3 people and a tanker truck with its driver. 2 of the bodies were recovered, but the other 2 were never found, likely entombed below the rubble. A Greyhound bus was also stopped by the initial avalanche, but the driver had decided to immediately turn around, which proved to be a very lucky escape for him and his passengers. Though the mountains are stately and majestic, every now and then we're given a reminder that the forces of geology are never stopped. Things are always changing and being rearranged.
Yeah.
just saw it.
Oh, I didn't. It was looking the other way.
Well, it's up here. But
that's what that was. I remember seeing a bunch of stone.
Okay,
rubble.
just around this bend is the turnoff to get up to the viewpoint.
Oh my God.
You'll see a highway pullout on our
That's
left.
insane.
The short road to the viewpoint is at the far end of the pullout. After turning, follow up the short hill to the best view. There are some basic facilities here, and by that I mean there are some pit toilets. Use those at your own risk. When it's time to leave, be sure to turn back the way we came towards Hope. So, turn right to get back onto the highway, heading west. If we're going the wrong way on Highway 3, we'll end up something like 250 kilometers away from Kamloops.
Okay. That's insane.
Look at the mess there, Rodney. Just bloody hell. If it's full up, don't empty it there. Or maybe the bear got in.
Shit.
Oh, look at that.
Wow.
Don't drive too near the edge, love.
Wow.
That was...
Don't drive too near. So was this the road at one time, hon?
I guess so.
Jeez. Well, they'd be dead before they knew it, wouldn't they? Hey. Terrible. Terrible.
Yeah, it's pretty low.
You plug it in, hon.
Karen, if you do you want to get out?
It's up to Jay, I don't care.
I don't...
No, I wanted to have a quick view.
Alright.
The experts. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Just on the way down to a customer and then just stop by for a
Down
beer.
that rack.
Yeah.
Down there,
Oh,
it came
top of
all
it.
the way down there. So they left it, they couldn't fix it. So let nature just do it.
Well, what is there to fix, Mom? I mean,
Yeah, you can't clean that all up. So eventually the trees and the nature will grow over it. Won't it?
mhm.
Well, what was the fellas that died then? Were they workers or?
Well, there was a snow avalanche, and they stopped and they said, "Well, what do we do?" And the bus driver said, "I'm getting the hell out of here." And he turned the bus around and drove away. But everyone else sat there like a bump on a log, and eventually the rocks came down and crushed them.
Oh, that was what happened.
Four died. They found 2 bodies, and the other ones they didn't find the other 2. So
Yeah, that's why they tell you don't stop in this area, right?
You never know. That's like when people are looking at a tsunami. They say, "Oh, look at that."
Ooh.
And the next minute they're running away from it. It's something weird is happening and the clouds are on the water. Get away.
wow, that's intense. Like that's huge.
yeah.
And it rolled over here. Look at that, eh? How much emotion.
I used all my battery coming up here, so I want to see how much it charges it on the way back down.
How long ago was that?
1965.
65.
I think it's a bit ghoulish when you know
Well
the bodies
done.
there.
So, it'll just be a few minutes before we reach Highway 5 again.
There was.
Was there a memorial
Yeah, there was.
Is that what you call it? A memorial?
Yeah, no, you're right, and there was one.
Otherwise the whole friggin' bus would have been killed.
Well, that's just it.
They wouldn't get back on the bus.
No, there was a bus, a truck, and 2 cars. And the bus driver turned around. Well, that's probably how they know how many people died, because the bus driver turned around.
They
And
saw
they-
the 2 cars, they wouldn't move.
And they said to him how many cars were there, and I don't know. Obviously, I don't know.
When it happens fast. you see them stopping at the top, but then they start, you know, the momentum starts and they can go like really fast. I've seen a couple of them on the highway to hell, and that's what happens. And one fellow was driving his truck, and a bloody big boulder had hit the big thing, like, I mean big, as big as his cabin, and it just hit the end, it bounced off, and he just got through that, and then all the other stuff come, and so he was in between the rocks, and he just got out of the cabin like that and went, oh, you know, phone for help.
Just another day on the coke.
Yeah. Very lucky, and then you see it on his camera. Very lucky, like a boulder as big as his cabin bounced off the engine onto the floor and then the ground, and then the more started behind him, got the trailer but never got his cabin. And yeah, this is prone for boulders. I don't know why.
Because it's a mountain.
The spirits don't like a lot of traffic.
I didn't realize the hill was this steep coming up.
Yeah.
No wonder it sucked so much battery juice.
Yeah.
Our ears are popping like crazy.
It's charging it back up. It's almost at half again already. Yeah. Well, it was at about half when we went up, and then I looked and it was almost empty.
Tea in there since 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30. 6 hours and it's still hot.
5 hours. 6 hours it'd be 2:30.
Hey?
6 hours it'd be 2:30, but
yeah.
that's what noise a marmot makes.
I know, yeah.
Is any crisps?
Yes.
Doritos some Jay.
Huh?
Doritos and regular chips.
Oh, I want chips.
Oh, you said you want crisps. Right?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Well, which one?
Crisps.
These?
Isn't there one that's open?
No, they're Doritos.
Oh, okay.
These are open. No, these are not open.
Ronnie, look at her hands sticking out. She's like,
Look behind you.
If you have one.
Hello.
Got one? Want some Jay?
no, thank you. You like avocado on crackers and cheese. That's what I've been craving for.
Yeah?
Yeah, like nice fresh avocado on crackers.
We're back at Highway 5. Exit from the right lane to re-enter the highway heading towards Kamloops.
I see a little cafe or something in Merritt. I was thinking we might stop. Can I go here? No. Oh. There it is.
What's this one?
Now we're going back to the highway. But that was a little bit of a detour. Got some idiot that won't let me back in. Hopefully I don't have some...
The exit for Othello Tunnels is coming up. I most definitely recommend a short visit to the tunnels as the best thing to see on the entire Highway 5 route. The Othello Tunnels were dug as the best option for a railway route through the Coquihalla Canyon. In all, 5 aligned tunnels were forged, and 2 bridges were needed to connect 3 of them. The tunnels are also called the Quintet Tunnels, for obvious reasons. To visit the Othello Tunnels, the exit is number 183. Then follow the signs for the tunnels and Coquihalla Canyon. After we exit, we'll follow a side road alongside the Coquihalla River until we reach the tunnel's car park a few kilometers after exiting. Our visit here won't take all that long, but it's an enjoyable stop, and you'll be able to catch some nice photos of the tunnels lining up. It's just a leisurely 2-kilometer easy walk if you want to do the whole thing.
The river. Oh, it's 120 here. Holy fuck. And then the next thing is this thing is to slow down. Don't tell me what to do.
Keep your distance. Not just slow down. Keep your distance.
No wonder it's faster here.
We have officially begun the second half of our drive from Vancouver to Kamloops, and we've entered the wild unknowns. Well, it's not that unknown. It really isn't all that wild anymore either. But still, the next town we see will be the small community of Merritt, and that's at least a good hour drive from here. After Merritt, the next population center we'll see is the final destination of this leg of our tour, which is Kamloops. So expect us to arrive in about 2 hours. The Coquihalla is not officially the Trans-Canada Highway for the section from here to Kamloops. The true Route 1 Trans-Canada Highway is the old route that follows the way through Fraser Canyon. That is quite the spectacular drive, but for most people, they want to get through this section quickly and get to the Canadian Rockies. So the Coquihalla is like the fast Trans-Canada Highway, and that's the way I'm taking us today. Though the scenery is new now, I'll admit that some parts of this drive get a little repetitive, so I'll do my best to keep us entertained. I promise there's loads of fantastic scenery and places worth pulling over and stopping for as we move further east. But I don't have any must-do stops for quite a while as we get through this section.
Recommended to stop
so
here to
just
check out the
relax
tunnel.
and enjoy the scenery as it passes us by.
Where's this road?
On the tunnel. This is a dead end. Looks like. But. Oh, maybe because it goes under a ton of crowd. The water's so big. It's so nice.
What's this place on?
I don't know if I'm supposed to come down here.
Jump. You're not supposed to be here right now, I don't think. It's the jump.
I don't like it. I don't know, Rodney.
I don't think so either, but we're here now, so
You're on 4-wheel one.
I don't have 4-wheel drive on this.
Eh?
I don't have 4-wheel
Oh,
drive.
yeah,
Oh God, that's all we bloody need. The door's locked. How are you going to turn around?
I don't know.
To come back after the car comes? This is somebody's property. This is not a glen. This is Rodney. I thought we were going on a tour.
We are.
What if the guy didn't see where you're going?
Go forward. Fuck this.
Watch the logs. The flowers. Ooh, they were happy.
Okay, grass. It'll end up in somebody's garden.
Those people were like, where the fuck is that guy?
No, wait, where are we going? Oh, it's just an empty space. What's that over there, lying over there?
This trolley.
It's a body. No, we're not going down anymore.
That's a barbecue over there.
Well, somebody's been camping and left everything. Go home. Bury him.
Oh, that's people.
Put them away now, Rob. Thanks, Jay. All the lovely flowers. What were you supposed to be looking at anyway?
I don't know. He said come down here and there's some interesting tunnels, and I didn't.
Interesting what?
Tunnels.
There's some signs of the devil and everything.
Well, hey, we're adventuring in the woods. We're taking our car and hiking.
That's cool. A woman driving past with metal in her mouth. not like a redneck. You know, instead of white trees, she had like metal in the teeth.
Come on. I don't know where we're supposed to go.
House.
Yeah, I don't know where we're supposed to go.
You come the wrong way, I think.
I think so too, but I mean, I don't know where to go.
Where would there be a tunnel there? I don't know, right? That was a very interesting tunnel.
Well, meditate too. At least it's not a swinging bridge.
We're back on the highway.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know where else to go.
Have you down that way?
No, that road just runs beside the river. And it says no exit, right?
Oh, continue straight.
You want to see what's down there? Okay.
No, I said continue straight back. Oh, no.
Oh,
Not here.
Oh, here we go. Stop of interest.
that's it. Just a little notice. Still fat and not getting out to be eaten alive.
That's in
It's the Honda Bridge.
Brigade
The
Trail.
Hudson Bay Bridge Trail. That's nice.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Not quite what we were expecting.
I know.
They can't all be bangers.
No, but you said the other road that had like the bridge that goes over the river is just the one that follows the river.
Like down that way just keeps following the river.
But there was, instead of you turning right, why couldn't you turn left? When we got out of that weird funky...
Oh, it just goes around so you can get on the highway the other side.
Oh, that's all that is. Oh.
Yeah. I think so.
Where are we?
Back on the highway now.
Othello Road.
Yeah, that's all it looks like to me.
Yeah, something tells me that was the way to go.
Huh?
The other way, instead of turning right, turn left.
Well, I've got tea, bread and marmalade. I'm all right.
Adventure area.
Points of interest, people's houses, caravans. Fishing.
Yeah, like the rocks flinging off the wheels.
Yeah, I know.
These woods and streams and the town of Hope were the location of something that started a legend. And something I don't think you'll expect at all. Though it was first released way back in 1982, this area was the filming location for the first of the Rambo movies, First Blood. Even so long after the filming, many of the locations, especially in the town, are exactly recognizable as they were in the movie.
Yeah.
I won't try to list any of them as the movie is so old you probably need to watch it again to remember what the set actually looks like. Though Rambo wasn't an Academy Award type of movie, it was a massive box office success, and the franchise made 3 movies in total. For Sylvester Stallone, Rambo was his second major character that movie audiences flocked to, since they'd already seen his boxing character in the first two Rocky movies. Though he had been involved in other productions, Rambo took Stallone from only being known by audiences as Rocky to being the Vietnam veteran ex-Green Beret
John
Rambo, a fully fledged action hero. Though Stallone's characters might seem like no more than tough guys, Stallone, the man, was genius, writing the scripts for all of the Rocky and Rambo movies. So if you get a hankering to put on a dirty red bandana and start running through the forest, or go hanging from the cliffs at the Othello Tunnels, just be aware, you won't be the first person to do it here.
Can't put a chance down there.
The Othello Tunnels were built as a necessity along the route of the famous Coquihalla Valley Railway. The origins of this railway were to provide supply lines for people and freight between the mining towns that were located south to the main Trans-Canada Railway line. In all, the railway was completed in 1915 and approximately 500 kilometers long, reaching from the Kootenay region in southeastern BC to the Okanagan to Huron-Hope. The build was extremely difficult through 3 mountain ranges. Some of the more interesting features were the tunnels and famous trestle bridges needed in steep canyons. The railroad became redundant by the 1960s, and all of the track was torn up except for a 10-kilometer stretch used by a tourist steam train in Summerland in the Okanagan. The rail bed that remained after tearing up the tracks was converted into a hiking and biking trail, which still reaches all the way from the Kootenay region to Hope. It's a very popular route with bikers because of the spectacular scenery and the fact that the rail bed remains no more than a 2% slope along its entire length. So, it's actually very easy cycling. It's a great ride to do a section of the Coquihalla Valley Railway or to do a multi-day ride over its full length. Dominates the sports shows, and in fact, when broadcasting a sport that Canadians aren't too familiar with, the commentators will often resort to hockey analogies and comparisons to help viewers understand what's going on. Well, I guess that has to be expected from the national sport, right? But hang on. In actual fact, ice hockey is not the original official national sport of Canada. It recently did become the official winter sport, but a true Canadian knows the nation's official sport is lacrosse. Lacrosse was played by First Nations people, mostly in the north, but then it was a bit more of a violent sport. In fact, just one step below full-blown warfare. Between 100 and 1,000 men would play the game on fields as large as 3 kilometers long. Players would routinely get injured, and sometimes killed. In those days, the head of an animal, and sometimes the head of an enemy player was used as ball. So, what is today's lacrosse like? It's a game played with sticks. Each stick is about 130 centimeters long, 4 feet, and at one end is a hoop with a net strung between it. Imagine a tennis racket with a smaller head and strings so loose that they sag somewhat. This net is used to catch and hold a hard rubber ball instead of an enemy's head, which is passed between players. The game is played outdoors on grass or indoors on artificial turf. Its object is to score the most points, done by scoring in a net with a goalkeeper guarding it. There are many similarities between today's game and the one played by the young First Nations warriors, which was used to prepare them for real combat, and also to settle disputes between tribes. It's still an incredibly rough game, though today's players wear chest and shoulder padding and rarely, if ever, killed. Yes, I'm kidding. It's a fair... This is the Coquihalla Highway, or simply the Coke to those of us who use it regularly. Construction on the Coquihalla began in 1978 to provide a more direct route to the BC interior. The 109-kilometer first phase from Hope to Merritt was opened to traffic in 1986. The opening coincided with Vancouver hosting the World's Fair called Expo 86. The second phase of the highway, from Merritt to Kamloops, was opened 2 years later in 1988. Though it's an extremely busy route, there are no services directly on the highway between Kamloops and Hope. Opinions of this highway vary. Some see it as a beautiful drive through the countryside, while others see it as an utterly boring racetrack. Regardless of your opinion, it is easily the fastest way between the BC interior and Vancouver. It shaves off at least 90 minutes off the old Trans-Canada Highway route. Along the way, the Coke passes through 3 climatic zones, dozens of bridges and overpasses, a snow shed, and 2 provincial parks. It also passes the town of Merritt, and depending on the weather, it can be unlimited visibility or an all-out blizzard. I hope we get the views and not the snow, and I hope you enjoy the drive.
It's pretty nice, I think. Shylock Road. It's interesting.
To sound like your mother, but along this highway, it's very tempting to speed, even though we're climbing now. The posted limit is 110 kilometers per hour, and let's just say that it's routine that the RCMP will set up speed traps. I know it's a nice new road and it seems perfectly safe, and it probably is. Being a visitor does not tend to be an acceptable excuse if we get caught. British Columbia is well known to have heftier than normal fines for traffic infractions. So, my suggestion, stick close to the speed limit. We're going to have several long climbs and then long descents as we go.
It says 120 here, right?
Yeah, I guess they put it up to 120. There's no way this should be 110. I was going 130 for a while. Yeah, like he says, it's easy. You can just lean into the road here.
The Coquihalla Highway was an engineering and political challenge right from its planning stages. It was built to be driven quickly, and to do so meant wide lanes with gentle bends, dozens of bridges, a snow shed, and diligent maintenance to minimize the impact of snow and avalanches on the highway. All this contributes to environmental impact, which is why many fought the highway when it was first proposed. Given that the Trans-Canada Highway was already in place between Hope and Kamloops via the Fraser Canyon, it should perhaps come as no surprise that some of the opposition to the Coke was along the lines that it would be a waste of taxpayer money, just replacing an existing route with a brand new one. And for the operators of businesses on the old Trans-Canada, the new route would bypass them completely. And understandably, they argued fiercely that they would lose customers as more vehicles traveled the new highway. But perhaps the most controversial aspect of the Coquihalla was that drivers had to pay a toll to use it.
Oh.
From its opening in 1988, for the next 20 years, it was $10 a pop. Tolls for truckers went as high as $50. That's a significant cost for an extremely busy and essential route. The government eventually scrapped the toll in 2008, and by that time they've collected $845 million in tolls. The road construction cost $848 million just to construct. So those shrewd politicians made it sound like they had a grand plan all along. But really, the public backlash about the cost was motivation to end the tolls. So, this drive isn't going to cost us an extra penny today. next few kilometers, we're going to see some examples of the challenge of maintaining the highways in winter. The round concrete platforms that are on the side of the highway are gun mounts. A large howitzer-type gun is trucked in and lifted onto the platform, and from there, fired into the steeper snow-bearing slopes above the highway. If it's been managed well, and if Mother Nature is cooperating, any unstable snow masses can be released before they're big enough to cause a highway blockage. It's much better to do this than to have to close the highway and clean up a big mess after an uncontrolled slide.
For truck drivers to
And
put
this
chains
area
on.
gets a lot of snow. There are historical pictures where the road is no more than a tunnel through the snow. 12-foot high or more snowbanks on either side. And then we'll pass through the Great Bear Snow Shed. Slides follow this path often enough that it's just better to have a snow shed so the slide can pass safely over the highway. Speeds of snow slides or avalanches have been recorded at over 200 kilometers an hour.
Holy shit.
That'll help you understand why avalanche paths have all the trees and just about everything ripped out from the ground. Snow sheds are a whole lot more expensive than firing
Tunnel,
concussive
Abby.
shells into the
Tunnel.
mountains.
Here's
So
the
the
tunnel
sheds are only
coming.
built in places
Here's
where
the
slides are
tunnel.
frequent and harder to
Here's
control.
the tunnel.
And a quick word of warning, if you're hiking in an unusual and usually steep place, if you ever see something that looks like an unexploded shell, then there's a good chance that that is exactly what it is. Don't attempt to touch it or move it, but please do report the location you saw it to the best of your ability. I know that sounded dramatic, but it does happen that the shells get fired and they don't successfully detonate.
Oh my goodness.
Hi.
It's amazing how the trees just go straight up. They don't grow, some of them grow like that. But the majority of all the trees,
Doesn't have enough.
they reach up.
Doesn't have enough power. I told it to go 120 and it can only go 90
Why?
because we have no. It used all the battery power.
Oh God, we're not going to run out, are we?
No.
Today there's no financial cost to drive this route, but it can take a toll on your nerves. This pass is one of the longest, steepest roads in the country, and on a summer day, it may not seem too challenging.
Why are they going
But once the
slow?
winter
Because they
hits,
can't go up.
the trucks
It's
and
just so
commuters
steep,
looking
Mom.
to save some drive time
They come
inland
down, see?
may find themselves doing the
Slow
exact
here.
opposite.
Right,
While
just
snow
slow.
plows and sanding crews do their best to create safe driving conditions, Mother Nature isn't so easily stopped. And more than one vehicle has lost control and gone over some of
So
these
it's
steep
really steep,
embankments.
that's why they're going slow.
So gentle on those pedals.
Oh.
In fact, the treacherous conditions on the coast led Great Pacific Television to create the show Highway Through Hell, featuring a heavy rescue crew led by Jamie Davis Towing in Hope, BC. The kind of wrecks these guys face on a daily basis isn't your classic fender bender. Imagine a semi-trailer loaded with lumber, food, even mail, has slid off the highway and gone down a 200-meter cliff. Someone has to haul that wreck back up the mountainside and retrieve all the spilled goods. It makes for some pretty impressive reality television. If you ever get to see the show, you just might recognize that narrator's voice. Kinda sounds like me.
Is he the fellow that narrates?
What?
Is he the fellow that narrates Highway to Hell? He just said he is.
Joe.
He narrates Highway to Hell.
Yes, yes.
Hello.
It's a good show, Ron. You want to watch it sometime.
But he was just talking about it.
Really good. It's not stupid. It's good.
Of course, they say like water streams down the rocks, Rodney. Like where it got wet. It's cool.
Abby, okay? Are you okay? Oh, where's the wolf? Where's the wolf? Picture the animals. Oh.
Turn the AC off.
Yeah, I needed more power. I was slowing down to 40 kilometers an hour.
Oh my gosh.
Where's the wolf? Show mommy the wolf.
Is it back on?
It is now, yeah. up until we're going downhill again.
Okay.
We've entered into the Coquihalla Summit recreational area. That means several important things. First of all, as the name suggests, we're about to reach the summit for this portion of our drive. After this, we'll enjoy a long downhill run. Be aware that trucks are required to gear down through the steeper sections, and many will reduce their speeds to around 50 kilometers an hour. So let's keep our wits about us, since we'll be able to descend quickly. We may find ourselves coming up on large transport trucks and feel like they're barely moving. And do also keep in mind what I said earlier about how routinely this highway is patrolled. Nobody wants a ticket. If we're really taking our time to explore this area, Falls Lake makes for a very nice hike that can be done comfortably in about 90 minutes or less. It's not a must-do, but if you feel like it, it's a really nice walk through the forest with a pretty high alpine lake as the reward. Okay, so my absolute favorite thing about reaching this point of our drive is that I no longer have to stop and hand over $10. It makes me so happy. For 20 years, I'd begrudgingly handed over the cash. Now, I can just breeze right through here. No need to stop, no extra fees, just the way nature intended. If it's your first time through here, then I understand you might not feel the same exhilaration about this as I do.
Sorry?
It has a stick and has like the waves for my phone.
I don't know, I'm sorry.
Because it has it.
I kind of need to concentrate on what I'm doing here, but I'm sorry.
Fair enough. No, that's fine. So I don't know if I should turn it off or on.
No, just leave it on, it's
My
fine.
Bluetooth and my the Wi-Fi's on. Other things.
Wow.
The exit coming up provides us with access to the Britton Creek rest area. If we feel we need a quick washroom break, a stretch, or if we just need a short stop and some fresh air, then this is the place I suggest for a quick pull-in.
Yeah, judging him.
We're definitely going to be taking a bath today.
the climb to the top of the Coquihalla. Part 1 of the Coquihalla climbs anyway. That means that now we'll begin the gradual journey down into the next valley. The next valley is the Nicola Valley and is the location of the town of Merritt. It should take us about 40 minutes or so to get to, and we dropped quite a lot of the elevation that we gained in the last 20 minutes. But don't worry, once we get past Merritt, we'll start climbing all over again. If we're doing this drive during the summer, or more like any time when it's not winter, you might be wondering about whether it's all a little overstated about how treacherous the driving can be, with constant warnings, highway advisory signs, my story about the highway through hell and the like. Well, I can tell you that I've driven through here many, many times, and sometimes those winter drives are absolute white knucklers. It's actually better when it gets colder than about 6 or 7 degrees below freezing. The worst is when it's snowing or there's snow on the road, but it's slushy. That's when feeling you're in complete control becomes more of a hope than a guarantee. When it's much colder, the snow stays dry and provides much better grip actually. If you're from another country and you're not used to winter mountain driving, you might wonder about those chain-up areas too. Those are primarily for the use of trucks. Big heavy trucks are more likely to lose traction climbing up the mountain. Once a truck starts sliding and then it jackknifes, that's when it's going to be a problem, because most likely it'll block other traffic from getting through until it can be pulled back straight again. And truckers do not want to delay any of their trip, or worse than that, damage their rig, so they willingly pull off and chain up if snow makes conditions slippery. Cars and pickup trucks don't normally use chains. Winter tires tend to be good enough, but by no way guarantee that you'll stay on the road. And you really do have to adjust your driving to be much more conservative to suit the conditions. Today, I hope it's sunny and dry and the road feels good.
Qu'est-ce qu'on lui raconte? Quelle sorte d'histoire qu'on envoie-t-il? Bike the what? Bike the Banff Legacy Trail.
Sweet air if you want it. Don't mind if I do, eh? Do you want to check to see if there's a nice little rest area with a charging station near Merritt? And we'll stop there for half an hour or so and have a stretch. Sounds like Abby's getting a little fed up.
I don't know, she's playing with the papers. I keep playing with her and stuff. Yeah. She can have a good stretch.
And Merritt, M-E-R-R-I-T-T maybe? Or 1T? I don't know. It's about half an hour up the road.
Okay, I already admitted that some stretches of this drive over the next hour or so are a little bit boring. No, not boring. That sounds a little too dull. I mean that the scenery is not as spectacular as other parts of our drives. So if you don't mind, I'll fill out some of the time with a very special story. I'm going to tell us about the history of Canada. Now, I know that might have made that sound boring too, but I'll assume that we're not from Canada. Or if we are, maybe we don't remember this nation's history as well as we should. This won't be your textbook version, and I don't mind if you don't remember everything, but since we have a little bit of time on our drive, I'll put out some of the most important milestones that has gotten Canada to where it is today. I'll focus on the European history, but the story must begin with the Aboriginal people who occupied every region of Canada that white people explored. Canada has 3 distinctive recognized Aboriginal people. The first were originally called Indians, but they have been referred to as First Nations people since the 1970s. In the east and central parts of Canada, the Indians were seen to be hunters and gatherers, or they had developed farming techniques, or some thrived on both. On the west coast, the First Nations people had developed techniques of drying and smoking fish, and enjoyed fairly bountiful food sources. The second group of Aboriginals are called Inuit, and they lived, and still do, in small communities in the Arctic. They had incredibly developed skills, which allowed them to eat and survive using Arctic wildlife in some of the harshest environments on the planet. The third distinctive group are the Métis. They're a mixture of First Nations and both English and French parentage. Most commonly, an early European fur trapper or trader would take a First Nations wife, and that was the origin of the Métis. Though the Métis, on definition, might not seem pure native or aboriginal, they are recognized as a unique culture in Canada, and even in some of the northern prairie states in the USA.
By the airports, that's on the way down on this road. There's one right in the town. There's a couple in the town of Merritt.
Is there one that looks like it's at a nice rest area where we can stretch out?
No. One is just by the airport, and then the other ones are in town.
You see the road that runs east out of there? Is there anything along there? Because we're going to turn east. Yeah, I don't remember the number, but we're going to turn east, yeah.
So we're going to turn on 5A then.
I don't remember the number, but we're going to turn east.
There's two roads going east.
It's the main highway that runs through Merritt.
Okay, so it's 5A. One that one's right beside it and one that kind of pops out from the top. Okay, so it would be this one.
The first reports of Europeans setting foot on Canada were believed to be the Vikings, continuing expeditions from Iceland to Greenland to what we now call Newfoundland, more than 1,000 years ago. There isn't much evidence to suggest they stayed very long, and there's no ongoing connection with Canada. If you have the opportunity to travel to Newfoundland, be sure to make the visit to the Lanso Meadows, an authentic Norse community discovered by archaeologists in 1968 and a World Heritage Site. John Cabot is credited as the first European whose exploration led to the ongoing settlement of Canada. He was an Italian immigrant to England and the first person to map the Atlantic East Coast. He was believed to have set foot on Canadian land and claimed Newfoundland, and he claimed it for England. It would not be for another 113 years before the first English settlement was established in 1610. Frenchman Jacques Cartier made 3 trips across the Atlantic between 1534 and 1542. He claimed the same land for France. This was nearly 50 years after Cabot had claimed it for England. But if you aren't on location to justify the claim, it's understandable others might have the same idea. Jacques Cartier heard 2 Iroquois guides use the word Kanata to mean village, and he adopted this name, and the name Canada started to appear on maps from the 1550s on. So, it's the middle of the 16th century. Both the English and French have been to Canada, staked a claim, but no one has decided to set up house yet.
Alright, so just go through Merritt and...
Okay, so there's one on the airports in Merritt. That's past where we're going to be. There's one on the 97 Abbey. No, you're eating the books. You're not eating. Books are not for eating. Books are not for eating. There's a lot of pressure in that water bottle, eh? I played that thing out there.
My water bottle.
Had lots of pressure on there. Got mommy too. Oh, we're gonna go in Merritt or not?
We can go in Merritt. We have to turn there. Just it doesn't matter really where. If you see one that looks like it'll be easy.
I don't know if you've noticed, but along this section we see the landscape changing a little. The further we go, the less there is of relatively dense forest and the more grassy open areas we see. I don't mean the areas
Merritt.
cleared by logging, but the
Right.
more natural habitat. The mix of trees will subtly change from being dominated by conifers and evergreens to contain more aspens and other deciduous trees that drop their leaves each winter. This is, of course, a reflection of the changes in climate, with less wet ocean influences than when we were on the western side of the mountain range. You'll also see wildlife fencing on the sides of the highway. This fencing is very effective in keeping animals off the road, where they can be hit and killed, and can lead to terrible accidents for motorists too. In the 4 years before these fences were constructed, there were 74 wildlife accidents through here. In the 4 years after the fences were built, not a single incident. The downside is that the animals may not be able to move as freely or as easily as they'd like, relying on crossings under the highway. But compared to the alternative, I think that's not so bad.
I can't, this the guy talking in the background and I'll probably stop.
During the 1500s, Spanish, French, and English marine explorers had visited the east coast of the North American continent with some regularity. By the end of that century, the only true European colonization of North America had been achieved by the Spanish, and that was mainly in Florida and Mexico. There had been several attempts at colonies north of Florida by these same countries, but none had succeeded. It was the French that had first successful settlements beginning in 1604. Those first settlements were in what is now Maine in the U.S., Acadia, which is now Nova Scotia, and Quebec City, which was established in 1608. Samuel de Champlain was pretty serious about being successful in Quebec City, and built a fortress, which is still a part of the charming old city if you visit today. Conditions were brutal for those brave settlers who had to land by ship, build housing, and rummage up supplies quickly in order to survive treacherously cold winters. The indigenous peoples also posed significant threats to the French settlers. Though they were able to quickly make alliances with some of the First Nations, it took nearly a century until they were able to make peace with the Iroquois too. The French settlers expanded their way further into North America by following firstly the St. Lawrence River, the Great Lakes, and the Ohio and Mississippi rivers as a loose guide. That's why the French influence exists in places like New Orleans. At its peak, the French Empire in North America reached from Hudson's Bay all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. But the French did not have it all to themselves. King Charles II of England granted exclusive trading rights of the watershed that drained into the Hudson's Bay to the English-owned Hudson's Bay Company. That is a very sizable chunk of the continent. So British fur trappers and traders competed directly with the French counterparts for the lucrative beaver pelt market in Europe. And through the 1600s, English colonies were established along the Atlantic coast of what is now the USA. By the end of the 1600s, the English outpopulated the French. Tensions between the English and French settlements were increasing during the first half of the 1700s. The English were more numerous than the French, but at Quebec City, the French had a strategic advantage with their fort protecting the northern end of the St. Lawrence River, being at a location narrow enough that it could be controlled from the shores. The St. Lawrence is also vital as the major cargo and trading route from the Great Lakes. What was known as the 7 Years' War, or in the U.S. it's sometimes called the French and Indian War, came to a head in 1759 at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. The French were defeated by the English in this pivotal and bloody battle, and they lost their strategic advantage, signaling the decline of the French Empire of New France in North America. The commanders of both armies, Brigadier James Wolfe and Marquis de Montcalm, were both killed during the battle. Considered anything less than a brutal event filled with injury and death. The end of the 7 Year War did not turn into an annihilation of the French by the British. Perhaps this is the origin of Canada's reputation as a polite and friendly culture. Not to overly sugarcoat it, not everything is or ever was perfect, but there is some comfort in learning that though the English defeated the French and took control of the empire, it was not their goal to massacre all the French or commit something of a genocide like we often see in the conflicts of our times. The Protestant British Parliament passed a constitutional law called the Quebec Act, which allowed religious freedom for the French-speaking Catholics in what was named the province of Quebec, and also allowed them to hold public office. This act created something like a fusion of French civil law mixed with British criminal law. It was a form of recognition and accommodation of the different culture that existed within the North American British Empire. Now, once again, I admit that I'm very much simplifying this piece of history, not trying to make out that the British somehow acted like a bunch of saints, but it is the crux of the story of how French and English cultures came to coexist in what would become one single nation.
We're going to Merritt, and then we're turning to go to Kelowna. You had it right.
We're going into the town of Merritt. Because Kelowna is on the east. Merritt is off the highway that we're on right
we
now.
can. I would prefer not to. If there is a rest stop off the highway or somewhere near, that would be ideal.
None from all the way to Merritt's.
Okay, what's after Merritt?
Nothing after Merritt.
Okay, so what's
There's one at the airport.
Okay. Is there anywhere in Merritt that looks like it might be at a good place to stop? What did you say? There's one at the convention center or something?
One at the Ballet House across from it Street. One's at the Yaki's Pizzas. And one is at the Marriott Civic Center. That's all the way on the other side of the city.
Okay, what's the closest one?
The airport. I know. Come on. This is the Merritt's Information Center.
Okay, where is that? Take me there. There'll be a...
2202. Costs 0.35 per.
The bottom of this valley holds the Coldwater River, which is named for the Coldwater Indian band who called this area home before white European settlers arrived. Their story is similar to so many other First Nations groups in Canada. Trouble for the Coldwater people began almost immediately with the introduction of diseases to which they had no previous exposure and no immune defenses. The effect of diseases like smallpox were severe. Europeans wanted to farm or ranch cattle. The concept of this was foreign to the First Nations people. Elk, deer, and buffalo freely roamed the open ranges and valleys, and their way of life revolved around these animals for food, tools, and shelter. Europeans built fences and created land titles. Where tall flowing grasslands existed, weeds like sagebrush overgrew the grasses. Farmers even diverted water from rivers and streams, negatively impacting the salmon runs. Life was definitely much more difficult with the white man, and eventually the Coldwater people could no longer live their traditional ways and were limited to reserved lands, leading to further social and cultural deterioration. Today, we recognize the harm caused by the practices of those settlers who came before us, and efforts are being made to issue apologies and some restitution. But the reality is that aspects of the culture and traditions of these people will be lost forever.
Stale. Doesn't go bad.
Sourdough's
No. So you'll be able to take us to that information center?
Comstock Road passes underneath the highway just ahead. Comstock Road, mixed together with other forestry roads around here, make up a portion of the course for a stage of the annual Canadian Rally Championships. So if it's October and you see cars flying around the corners beside and below the highway, don't worry, they're not crazy kids. They're dedicated driving professionals.
People can't see the turn.
What's that? You want to give it a try yourself? Well, I guess I am kind of like a navigator, but I'm not that type of navigator.
The view on the left.
How about we just stick to the highway?
Plains of heaven.
Yeah, I know, eh?
We're not far now from Merritt.
one major intersection.
Mm-hmm.
The region that we're driving through is collectively called the Thompson-Okanagan. Its rough boundaries extend from Hope to Kamloops and the Fraser Canyon route that the original Trans-Canada Highway followed, and the more remote areas north of Kamloops. That's the Thompson part. The Okanagan part is the Okanagan Valley, which extends for about 250 kilometers from the U.S. border up to the Shuswap Lake and Trans-Canada Highway. That whole valley is about 120 kilometers to the east of us. 150 years ago, you might have thought that this part, the Thompson, was going to do better and be more populated. That's because of the gold rush and the belief of many prospectors that the rivers were full of
It's in a
gold.
parking lot.
I don't think there'd be any debate that it was the Okanagan that turned out to be a little more successful, with the city of Kelowna and neighboring large towns up and down the valley. That was on the basis of being an even better location for agriculture.
It's a level 2
The Okanagan proved to be one of the best places in all of Canada to grow fruit and vegetables. Later, it was the winemaking industry that has really taken a strong grip on the economy. But here in the valley, they enjoy an average of 2,000 hours of sunshine per year. So they've got some big claims to being a better place to live too. As a collection of valleys and regions, the Thompson-Okanagan really is the epitome of Western Canada and British Columbia.
That's where you move to, right? Sunshine all the time. Kamloops or Okanagan. There's a lot of people from Winnipeg and Okanagan.
The town we're approaching is called Merritt. It has just about every service you would expect from a town of less than 10,000 people, so if we're feeling like we need to stop, this would be our best option for the next hour or so. Just follow the highway signs to the exit. One of Merritt's most famous landmarks is the more than a century-old Coldwater Hotel. To find out if anything special is going on while we're here, there's a visitor center located at the exit for Highway 5A at the south exit to town. That highway is called the Okanagan Connector and is a major time-saving addition for folks traveling between Vancouver and Kelowna and the rest of the Okanagan.
It sounds
If
about
we leave the
perfect.
Coquihalla Highway to visit town, you'll have no trouble feeding back on so we can continue.
You told me there's a plug-in station at the Visitor Information Center, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Is that
that's
where that is?
yeah, it's right like at the corner of
Right
where
there.
we need to go.
Yeah, because this one is north. This one says south, right?
And there'll be a green space to run around in for a bit too. Which I assume, I don't know. I mean, obviously I've never seen their visitor center, but hi. Hi.
Hello. Hello. Hello, Abby. Hello, Abby. I see you. I see you, see you, see you.
Is that the Visitor Information Center over there?
No, I said you have to go through the whole town to get
Oh,
to
that's Merritt that way, huh? Go over there now, you've ruined this land.
You're
That's
You're not
somebody's
even in the
house, I
town.
think.
The
It
town
could
is on
be.
the other side of the highway, Rod.
Dumbo.
You have to continue down that way.
Oh, just go there, I'm not sure now, Rod. There's a big
There's
sign
nothing
there.
there. There's no plugging station. It's a nice big visiting area and stuff, but that's not the it.
There's something.
I said to go to Merritt, pick through town, and it'll be in the town.
Yeah.
We're not even in town yet. You got some peanut butter and honey everywhere.
Yeah, and he's what? Peanut peanut butter and honey.
Cleaning your hands much. Got everywhere. Your stroller, we'll have to take it out and dump it. Empty it. I'll just shake you off too.
Horses. Lovely, weren't they? Lovely horses, them.
So we're on Nicola Street.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
The information centre will be
Yes, on
with this
Nicola.
in the city centre, huh? Probably. It's not a big place, then. Jehovah's Witness. I'll go there. It's a nice little town. Look, everything's new.
Were we continuing down that highway road that we were on?
No.
Oh yeah, okay. So we went the other way, yeah. So Othello?
Everything is new.
Yeah, we're gonna get out soon, actually, don't worry. We're gonna shake you up. Shake you up.
Okay,
Getting
so-
out soon,
It's gonna like literally be a main intersection. It's probably the only one in town. It's called VOGHT Street. What is that? How do we say that?
Vaught
Vaught
Street.
Street, yeah.
There's a sign for it right there.
Yeah. There we go.
Vaught Street, and then you turn on your right, and it'll be on the right. A lot of signs, I guess, are
I got your nose. I got it. I got it.
Look at all those logs, eh?
Well, that's what they're using here, eh?
I guess so.
It's a logging town. Look at them all. Holy moly. Look.
Holy moly.
Oh, that's the sawmills, Rod. That's how they make,
Make wood?
yeah. Well, the wood is already made. They shaped. I've got your nose. I got it. I got it. City centre. Oh,
no, it's on the left. It's on the right.
guns fishing. Oh, that's
It's like a block and a half away off the street.
City Hall one, is that it?
No, it says it like
I'm seeing where his mom. EI, there's the I button there.
Visitors there.
nice.
Like a nice walk, I guess.
Find something, yeah.
See the plug?
No, do you?
Oh, the plugging is further up. Sorry, bud. I have to continue on the street. To start digging. Yeah, it's up with that street, bud. Like, the one that you turned off right now, it's on that road. Vote Street, or whatever you call it, but.
Okay. So I'm gonna turn right here and keep
Yes.
going. There, I can see the sign for it right there.
That's a different one.
Well, I'll go that one.
Okay.
Good, I'm seeing it.
course, some big bastards parked his truck in front of it.
You can get this side, huh?
I know. It's just ignorant. That's all.
The
Yeah.
other plugging station, there was like a green area close to it.
How far is it? Can we walk? It can't be that far.
Go for
it
a
was
walk.
right-
Need to
It
plug
was
in.
a little up the street where you saw those white crosswalk, pedestrian crosswalk.
We'll just stretch our legs anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to throw the rubbish out anyway, so let's get out and get sorted here. Yeah. These got all the water spilt on them, so they have to go.